So what exactly is the United States trying to get out of these sanctions? I've been speaking to Mark Dubowitz, who's the executive director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, an expert on sanctions, and he's testified before Congress and advised the U.S. administration on Iran and the sanctions issue.
The U.S. strategy with sanctions is really to change the risk-reward calculus of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and try get him to compromise on his nuclear weapons program. So sanctions are meant to force a change in his decision-making, in his risk-reward calculus.
So the sanctions that are in place already are not making the impact that Washington might have hoped?
Well, so far, no. I think so far Iranian nuclear physics is beating Western economic pressure. The Iranian nuclear program continues to move forward. The Iranians have promised to introduce advanced centrifuges into their enrichment facility in Natanz, and they are quickly reaching critical capability where they'll be able to produce a bomb's worth of weapon-grade uranium in a manner that will be undetectable by the IAEA and Western intelligence services within a year to 14 months.
So why is it that Washington still believes that turning the screw even further on Iran might bring them the outcome that they hope for?
Well, I think Washington and I think the international community wants to avoid the other two terrible alternatives. One would be a nuclear weapon in the hands of this regime, and the other would be military strikes to forestall that possibility. So sanctions are sort of the last peaceful option to try and bring the Iranians back to the negotiating table and to get a compromise deal.
Are these new sanctions going to hit Iran particularly hard because it's already suffering from foreign currency that it actually needs?
Well, that's exactly right. And this mechanism almost acts like a gift card where the Iranians have no choice but to spend this local currency and actually spend it on food and medicine. I mean, they can buy all the food and medicine they need from countries like Japan or South Korea or India and others. So it's a way of relieving the humanitarian concerns for the average Iranian and at the same time denying the regime the hard currency it needs to sustain its economy, its nuclear weapons program, and its vast system of domestic repression.
In theory, that sounds all well and good, but in practice, this relies on other countries complying with China, with India, or Japan. All of these countries have to say, yeah, that's fine, we'll withhold the foreign currency.
Well, it's completely in the self-interest of these countries to do so. They don't want to spend hard currency on Iranian oil. They much prefer to spend local currency, have it locked up in a bank account in those countries, and then force the Iranians to actually spend the local currency on goods from their exporter. So it's actually a win-win for India and China and South Korea. It's in their self-interest to comply.
And what in your view is the relationship between what Washington is doing and what the American population think about the relationship between Washington and Tehran?
Well, opinion polls in my country have shown overwhelmingly that Americans want to stop Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. In fact, a majority actually support military strikes. So I think the American public is quite hawkish in recognizing the nature and gravity of the Iranian threat. I think American policymakers are trying to resolve this peacefully through the use of sanctions and coercive diplomacy.
But it's interesting that, the sanctions were never meant to bring the Iranian economy to a collapse, but that's exactly what they have been doing, even if these latest ones might counter that to a certain extent in terms of allowing medical supplies to get through to the country.
Well, you're right, but the problem is there's simply no such thing as a smart sanction where the Iranian elite is crippled and the common man spared. Iran has a deeply socialized economy, and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, who are really the regime's Praetorians who oversee the nuclear program, are invested in virtually every economic sector, especially energy. So it's really impossible to hurt the Guards or the supreme leader who controls vast wealth without shocking the entire economy.
That was Mark Dubowitz, Executive Director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies.